Hey everybody, Mr. Weinland here with my Iron Man Infinity Gauntlet. I am Iron Man. Yeah, it's my son's. I'll put it down. I'll stop playing with toys. Um, okay, so let's talk about this. This is one of my favorite things to go over. I love this topic. It's Batman v Superman: failure or misstep. Love this. I really do enjoy this lesson that I go over. And the reason why I do this, I know it's well, one, it's fun, but two, the fact is that it does. This is a good example. The story that I'm going to go over about the DC films is the danger sometimes of when you have production crews or even producers jeopardizing movies or messing with movies, and sometimes can really hurt the product and hurt the fan base and every aspect of the whole idea of a franchise. So here's some of the questions. If you want to write them down, pause here. We're going to talk about Christopher Nolan and his success with Batman. We're going to talk about directing Superman films that were following after the Christopher Nolan Batman, one of them being Man of Steel. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what followed Man of Steel with Batman v Superman. We're going to talk about Warner Brothers making BVS, Batman v Superman Justice League. We're going to talk about that as well. And then eventually we'll talk about the future of DC films. But feel free to write these down now, pause the video, and then make sure you write down your answers as we go through this PowerPoint presentation. All right, let's go. So let's talk a little bit about this. Batman and Superman were some of the two major superheroes coming out of DC, along with Wonder Woman and Green Lantern, The Flash. But really, was Batman and Superman that made a lot of success for Warner Brothers when it came to filming movies. Over the years, we've seen the Christopher Reeves Batmans, the two Tim Burton films in 1989 into the 90s, and then you saw more of that Tim Burton style follow with other two movies that he didn't direct, but they took kind of that Gotham City aspect. And so we had some success with Batman and Superman on film, especially with Warner Brothers. But for a while, it wasn't until sometime in about the late 90s, about 99 into the maybe 2000, that you start seeing Warner Brothers really look at trying to reboot Batman, because they tried to reboot Superman and try to go back to that Christopher Reeves type style with Brandon Roth as Superman, but it wasn't very successful. I think people were done with that type of Superman. They were wanting a little bit more, I don't know, more modern Superman, a little bit more dealing with the personal issues of what was going on with him and society. So I think we could have done a little bit more with that. But Batman was pretty successful because the cool thing about Batman is that Batman is Batman. We all know him as this rich guy with a lot of gadgets who can go around, and he's a detective and he knows how to take down bad guys. And it's very action packed. It's very straightforward. This is the bad guy. This is the good guy. Boom, go. You can go a little bit more with Batman. Whereas Superman, it's a little bit more complicated, and we're going to talk more reasons why. But I want to just stay on Batman. The reason why Batman is successful is because of what Christopher Nolan had done. Christopher Nolan, did Memento. He's done a few other films building up to this movie. I know him for Inception. Also, I know him for some of the other films that Dunkirk that he's done. But he had only done a few handful of films like Memento, and he then gets the job for Batman. And a lot of people were kind of concerned: what is Christopher Nolan going to do with Batman? Is he going to make him fun, exciting? Is it going to be too realistic? Is it going to be too dramatic? And honestly, what you did with Christopher Nolan, what he did with the Cape Crusader, is that he made him very gritty. He brought a little bit of that sense of reality. Like, he didn't want to bring too much of the supernatural. Because if you look at Batman, Batman himself is not supernatural. Like, he doesn't have any superpowers. But there have been a few villains that he's faced over the years that have had some form of supernaturalism to him. Not all of his villains like Penguin, Joker, the Riddler, um, Scarecrow to a sense don't really have a lot of supernatural powers. But if you look at Bane, he's kind of a little bit more supernatural in some aspects, and with the superpowers that he's had. And supernatural doesn't have to be scary, by the way. Supernatural can be just the extreme, like, or just the unknown, or even sometimes just like superpowers that we just don't explain. It can't explain how somebody got them. But he's had a few supernatural villains. Just they look different. But a lot of his villains, you didn't have to create these super big bad guys, and more relatable to the human element. And that's what Christopher Nolan did. It's kind of like, what would Batman look like in today's society? And he took that aspect, but still brought some of the things we love about him in the comics and made a more relatable Batman. And it was successful. And here's the thing: Christian Bale in Batman Begins, it grossed to over $374 million. I think they had a very smaller budget, but they still made a pretty good movie. It turned out to be one of the best in the franchise as far as money goes. And then we see, because of its success in 2005, not super huge, but huge enough to where it's like it deserved a sequel. They get The Dark Knight, and you put Heath Ledger as the Joker, and his performance, his presence, grossed to $1 billion. And basically, Warner Brothers was like, "Yeah, let's go ahead and let's bring in Heath Ledger to go ahead and let's after this success with Heath Ledger and Christian Bale and some other actors, let's go ahead and make the third movie," which they did. Dark Knight Rises grossed over $1 billion. Probably could have made more. If you remember, during the time of Dark Knight Rises, the movie theater tragedy in Colorado occurred. And sadly, it was during the movie Dark Knight Rises. That kind of hurt the movie a little bit, I think, because of the violence in the film and also the tragedy itself. It really hurt its ability, and also kind of hurt the viewing of the film, because when at the time the movie came out, and it's not Christopher Nolan's fault, and it's not Batman Rises' fault. But anytime you have a movie associated with a tragedy in that sense, it really does damper the viewing of that film. So it took a while for people to kind of separate the movie and the tragedy. But it was a difficult time, and even Christian Bale, I mean, did the right things, the PR and visiting the victims and realizing, okay, like, yeah, this is unfortunate, but it did hurt the film a little bit, but it was still successful. Still not as loved critically. I think even some fans don't like certain aspects of the film. I think there are some people disappointed about Bane, the look of Bane, and how Tom Hardy talks. I was fine with Bane. I think it was good. But anyway, the success of Batman led to Warner Brothers going, "Well, let's reboot Superman. Let's bring Superman into the world, and let's start to build a franchise. Let's build a franchise that we can start to add more and more DC characters." And we saw Green Lantern, which that came out, I think, roughly right around the time of Batman's success, and it tanked. Ryan Reynolds, that wasn't his fault, but the movie wasn't very well received critically. The script was terrible. Some of the effects were bad, so it was not as great. But anyway, Zack Snyder, was successful. Had made a lot of successful films, especially for Warner Brothers. And we see that, especially one like The Watchmen, that he was able to really impress Warner Brothers. And they wanted Warner Brothers at this time, seeing what Marvel's doing, knocking out hits. They're going, okay, let's do the same. Let's try to create our own little movie franchise, and let's take all the DC properties that we own and create something. And so they sign on Snyder, saying, we want you to kind of bring some of that realism of that Christopher Nolan did with Batman stuff. But what we want you to do is then also take that, but also bring in some of that supernaturalism, bring that some of those superpowers, and kind of also blend it with what Marvel's kind of doing. So take what Marvel's doing and what Christopher Nolan's doing and kind of bring it together and create this big, massive franchise. And Snyder, look, he's had some success. 300 was a successful movie. Watchmen was pretty somewhat successful, too long in my opinion, and probably should have been two separate movies. But still critically successful enough that he knew how to handle this stuff. But he's coming in to make a PG-13 film, but also make it as kind of gritty as best he can towards Batman, creating Man of Steel, which came out in 2011. Or sorry, he was hired in 2011, came out in 2013. And so in 2013, Man of Steel, starring Henry Cavill, basically, which a lot of people didn't know who Henry Cavill was. He hadn't done a lot of stuff, and ultimately comes in and basically takes on the role of Clark Kent and Superman. And it has a little bit of a realistic feel, but still bringing in some of those comic book elements. And we do see that it opened with 66 box office of 668 million. Now, here's the thing about this. Now, box office wise, that's pretty good, 668 million, but its budget was roughly right around 225 million. That is a huge budget. One, that's way too much money on the budget, and two, you have to understand is that when you have a budget like 225 million, you want to make sure you get a good sized profit margin from that. Their profit margin is pretty thin. It wasn't that big, and I think one, resources were misused in this movie, and two, this budget right here, that's something you would probably do for, like, I don't know, like an Avengers movie type level of movie where you're trying to bring multiple actors in for an ensemble type film. Man of Steel was not an ensemble type film. It's really, you had an actor that not a lot of people knew about, so it shouldn't have cost you that much. And then two, even some of your best well-known actors like a Kevin Costner, this is pretty much his only movie that he's going to be in. So you didn't have to pay him much. So I think certain resources were misused, and there's too much tapped into certain CGI elements. And either way, it was still well received. People like it, and it's one of those movies. At first, when it first came out, there was some controversy about, is this really my Superman? And also, when people watched the movie, there were certain elements, like there was a scene where Superman kills Zod. I mean, it's spoiler. He kills Zod at the end, General Zod, and only because Zod was about to kill some people. So Superman had to make a choice: either let those civilians die or kill Zod. And so some people had a problem with that scene and certain other elements that didn't feel like Superman. But honestly, it's one of those films. If you watch it once, you want to watch it again, and as you watch it more and more, you start to like it and love it. And it's a really good film. Zack Snyder did a good job with it, but he too much of the money. However, because of despite some criticism despite the critics and the fans having some questions about Snyder's direction with Superman, we do see that Warner Brothers is going to greenlight a sequel. So a lot of people were expecting a kind of like a Man of Steel type of sequel, but what they decided to do is that at Comic-Con, they come out and they announced, no, we are going to go a different direction. Instead of it just being a straight Man of Steel sequel, we're going to do a kind of like a buddy up type superhero movie, but instead of these two superheroes that we once know, Batman and Superman teaming up, they are going to fight against each other and basically create this Batman v Superman type movie. And they also announced at Comic-Con that Ben Affleck would be playing Batman. Now that made a lot of people mad that Ben Affleck was chosen to be Batman. A lot of people did not want Ben Affleck. Turned out, I think he was fine. I think he was one of the better Batmans, honestly. I liked Ben Affleck's portrayal of Bruce Wayne and Batman. I thought it was spot on. Yeah, there were certain elements that were a little, too dark. But I felt like he was perfect for the role. Honestly, I loved him in that role, and it's a shame that I only see him in 3 movies. But the idea of this, why go Why Batman v Superman, not Man of Steel 2? Well, because you got to understand that here's the thing that ended up happening during the time of Man of Steel is Marvel Studios was already off the ground since 2008. They created an Iron Man and Iron Man 2. They created Thor and Captain America, and then they were about to have a buddy up movie with Avengers. So that's like 5 movies right there that Marvel was already ahead, and DC is basically, if you don't count the other Batman movies, as far as their own like massive franchise, they only had one movie, and that was Man of Steel. So they wanted to get the ground rolling with more DC movies. And so what they thought with Batman v Superman 2, not only one would they have two superheroes in one movie, but they could also take an old Frank Miller comic known as Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, which is back in the 80s, I believe, which basically shows that Superman in this comic, and it's a dark comic, very dark comic. In this comic, basically, Superman works for the United States government, and he's kind of doing some shady stuff. And Batman is like, dude, like Clark has gone off the road here. He's not quite the superhero that he once was. Superman's got to be taken down. He's too much of a threat and a weapon, and we've got to figure out a way to stop him. And so basically, that's why Bruce Wayne, and much older Bruce Wayne, basically comes up with this decked out armor to protect himself from Superman and to help take him on. So Warner Brothers, somebody had the mindset of let's greenlight this. This is a great greenlit this thing, and let's do it. So they do. They greenlit Batman v Superman. It's actually took a 3-year wait instead of a 2-year wait from Man of Steel, and so it came out in 2016. So Man of Steel 2013. We see this movie 2016, so 3-year difference. And also the cool thing about this movie is we found out that Wonder Woman, not only is it Batman and Superman in this movie, but Wonder Woman's in this movie. So it opens up to a whopping 168 million domestically. That's really good opening. It was probably one of the highest openings in March history. I think at the time it was number one. It's not anymore. I think Beauty and the Beast broke that record, the live action one. But the thing about this is that when it opened, everybody was like, "What? Wow, okay, great opening." However, the fan base, when they come out of that movie, is like, not so great. So, here's the thing: great opening, and the movie grossed over 873 million worldwide. So far, the franchise at this point, you're like, wow, this is going off to a good start. Let's go back a little bit. However, despite the box office success, critically, this was not a very well received film. It got 35% on Rotten Tomatoes. And look, I'm not the biggest fan of Rotten Tomatoes. I think sometimes critics can manipulate and jeopardize, and their formula on Rotten Tomatoes is a little bit too skewed. So 35% on Rotten Tomatoes, I think it might have been somewhere closer to 50%, in my opinion. I think it was a little bit more polarizing. I think a lot of people either loved this film or hated it. I don't think it was a direct hate. But when you watch the film, the theatrical version, you do kind of see where people don't like it. When you go and watch the extended cut, because we're going to talk a little bit more about that, the extended cut, you'll think differently. But at the time when the theatrical release of this movie came out, it was at 35%. And so, not a lot of fans and critics really love this film. Some fans more love this film. So, the fan Rotten Tomatoes review is a little bit better than the critics. And here's the other thing, too, that was not good about Batman v Superman. So, it had 168 million opening. But on its second weekend, that was on its first week. On its second week, it went to 64 million. So that's a 62% drop. Usually, when you're at the movie theaters, you for movie studios, when they release a film, you want to get mostly a 50% drop. Okay, that everybody who wanted to see this film saw it the first week, and the diehard fans. And so the second week, that you're basically playing catch up a little bit. You're trying to get everybody else who hadn't seen it is going to go see it probably the second week. and you know that everybody who had seen it, wanted to see it, may not want to see it again. So you realize that you're going to drop 50%. You're going to, and so a lot of times when you get about a 50 to 55% drop, that's pretty much expected. But this got a 62% drop, and especially for a Superman Batman film, this should have been a more rewatchable film. So I think a lot of the producers were expecting a 45%, maybe at worst a 50% drop, and it got a 62% drop. And that told them that a lot of people did not really like this movie as much, or probably told their friends, like, yeah, it's good, but I mean, don't rush out and see it, you know? So it's that really hurt. And ultimately, I think why it wasn't as successful, there's a lot of things to it. Why was it not successful? One, critics had a hard time with the story. The fact that why is Batman and Superman, why do they hate each other? They teamed up with each other in the comics. Why are they against each other? And so that kind of disappointed people. The story, also sometimes how the superheroes were portrayed. There was some definite debate on Batman doesn't kill. Batman's not a killer. Why do they have Batman kill here? And especially because there's a scene where basically Clark Kent's mom is kidnapped, and I'm sorry if you haven't seen the film, but she's kidnapped in the movie, and Batman goes to save her, and he ends up killing a bunch of dudes, and a few dudes, and to me, it's like I don't care. I mean, it's the situation is warranted. Okay, got bad guys trying to kill Clark Kent's mom, so to me, it's fine. It's justified. It's justified. But to the diehards, they were mad. So that's part of it. The other part of it, it's a very long film, 2.5 hours long. Now, here's the thing: the extended cut is just roughly under 3 hours. So Zack Snyder did an even longer cut of this film. And when you watch the theatrical version and then you watch the extended cut, you can see what they cut. And and I'll tell you, when you watch the extended cut, it is a lot better. It's a much fuller film. The story makes more sense. The acting's better. There's a lot of elements that help the actors. But the shorter version, the 2.5 hours long one, really did hurt the film. And it didn't also, the other problem is it didn't feel like a Man of Steel 2 sequel. You could definitely tell, because I think a lot of people are expecting, well, this is going to be Superman's story. Well, no, it's Batman's story, especially in this in the theatrical version. There's a lot more focus on Batman, when really the lead should have been Superman. And then in the extended cut, Superman is more of the lead than Batman. But unfortunately, that disappointed a lot of people. A lot of people were expecting more of a Man of Steel sequel. Instead, they didn't get that. And then ultimately, Snyder wanted it to make it rated R. But because of that, because the studio saying, no, we're not going to make it rated R, you have to make it PG-13, that affected the story as well and the direct cut of the film. So that really did hurt as well. So again, why was BVS not as a success, considered a success, even though it made a lot of money? Again, the 3 hour version did eventually get released on Blu-ray, but that it being a very long movie from the beginning hurts. And then also fans just, again, feeling like Superman not being featured, too many plot holes in the movie. Despite that, Batman v Superman may not have been considered a success, because it made so much money, it did allow Snyder to move forward with the DC universe. And it did help Wonder Woman, because I will say, when you watch BVS, Gal Gadot, or Gadot, whatever you want to pronounce it, Gal Gadot, whether or not you like Gal Gadot, you will have to say that Wonder Woman is pretty awesome in the movie, and I love the movie Wonder Woman. So that did help build Wonder Woman and other Batman and other characters to kind of stay in the world and get them to get them a movie, which ultimately leads us to them moving forward. We see that Suicide Squad was being made. Also, the time that Batman v Superman had been filmed, and it was being released in August of 2016. And Suicide Squad came out with mixed reviews, both fans and critics. There are elements to that movie is awesome, like Deadshot, Harley Quinn are great. And then there's certain elements of that film, like the villain, are just terrible. And so it was very mixed, very polarizing, but it made a lot of money at $746 million, which has led to many other sequels, like the other Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie that came out. So Margot Robbie, everybody loves her as Harley Quinn. So that has led to other movies as well. But a lot of people were worried because of Suicide Squad's failures, whether or not this is DC was almost on the verge of like cutting and rebooting. But DC moved forward with Patty Jenkins directed Wonder Woman in 2017. It was successful. It opened grossing at 821 million, and this movie was a hit when it came out. People kept seeing it and loving it, and critics loved it. And so this kind of saw a future in the DC universe of, okay, Warner Brothers is going to lead us in the right direction. And so this gives Snyder, one last shot to show that, he's going to be successful. So Zack Snyder was tasked to direct Justice League back in 2015. But unfortunately, halfway during the project, he steps away due to the death of his daughter. He doesn't come back to the film. And now it was played out that he wasn't going to come back. A lot of people argue that the Warner Brothers didn't want him back. And so that basically he had already finished the film and that his cut had been submitted and they hated the cut. And so Josh Whedon, who directed The Avengers, comes in. He was successful with The Avengers and Age of Ultron, whether you don't like that movie or not, that's fine. It was still successful. Steps in, actually finished the project. They decide, because they did not like Zack Snyder's cut, they go ahead and they refilm a lot of scenes and recut the film. When Justice League opened, it opened on November 2017 at a budget of $300 million. That's reported. Now, we don't know exactly how much, because is that 300 million with Snyder, or is that 300 million for the whole thing, even when Josh Whedon came in and did some reshoots? So there is a lot more debate on that number of how much the budget. So, and sadly, this movie which it's loaded with Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash is appearing in this movie for the first time, Cyborg for the first time. You think with the cast, Aquaman, the cast of characters in this movie, you would think that this movie was going to gross $1 billion. It should have been grossing $1 billion, name alone, Justice League. The fact is, I'm sorry, you see a Justice League movie, I'm going to go see that movie. Yeah, sign me up. You think everybody in America would sign up to go see that movie? No. And part of the reason why is when you watch the movie, it feels like two separate films. You have Josh Whedon, who had come in. You had Zack Snyder, who had basically did his own version of the film. And then you had Josh Whedon, who came in and then cleaned it up and directed different versions. And when you watch the film, it does feel like two movies. It feels like a Zack Snyder here and a Josh Whedon here, kind of just mixed in together as one. It felt like two separate movies, and there's a lot of mistakes and flaws to the film. It's still an enjoyable film, though. It's fun, and I would say watch it, yeah. But know that when you watch it, you're going to see that it feels a little off. And that's probably the reason why. It's two different films, and it doesn't really add up. And it's disappointing because that really sent Warner Brothers in a panic and wondering what to do. And here's the thing, there is a Zack Snyder cut. Zack Snyder has come out and talked about it. That basically, even though Zack Snyder was fired, even though Warner Brothers won't say that officially, the fact is that a lot of fans, because they were so upset that it felt like two different films, they wanted the Zack Snyder cut. Now, Warner Brothers says they either there was one thing. First, they came out, there's no cut. Well, then Zack Snyder said, yeah, there's a cut, but that I have to finish it, and da 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 da. And there's also evidence of deleted scenes and unfinished scenes that weren't into the movie. That there was a Zack Snyder cut, and Warner Brothers is refusing to do it. And now the good thing is there's Gal Gadot has come out and said Zack Snyder should be allowed to finish his cut, and Ben Affleck is in support of him now. Ben Affleck is no longer with Warner Brothers as far as the DC films, so I don't know if they're going to really listen to him, but if Gal Gadot comes out and says, yeah, there needs to be a release of his cut, and even Jason Momoa comes out and says that, and others, then maybe hopefully we get the Zack Snyder cut, because the reports are that there's a difference in tone in the movie. The Justice League movie is much of a family friendly film, the one that Josh Whedon finished. The Zack Snyder cut was supposed to be a little bit more darker. And in the Batman v Superman movie, there was a scene where we see a little bit of an apocalyptic world where Superman rules Earth, and he's kind of under the control of Darkseid, and basically he's, and in the scene you see Superman come down and he kills Batman, and then Bruce Wayne wakes up, and then he sees this vision of the Flash telling him like, "You need to save Lois," or something, talking about saving Lois Lane, and so we see that happen, play out in Justice League. Is that the key was Lois. And even though those scenes aren't explained very well, and fans were confused by them, when you watch the Justice League version of Zack Snyder, it explains that scene that you saw on Batman v Superman. And what was going to happen is that the beginning of the film of Justice League under Zack Snyder was going to show us Batman, the Flash, Cyborg in the future, with Darkseid ruling the world using Superman without Lois, who is cold-hearted, controlling the world, and Batman is trying to stop Superman to save the world. And so he sends the Flash back in time to communicate with his own self, to kind of get the tracks rolling about this key moment in time against Steppenwolf, of how to stop Steppenwolf. And so the key was Lois. And that was going to be shown in the movie, but unfortunately, because the movie was considered too dark, Warner Brothers was like, "Nah, we're done." So anyway, that kind of killed the Snyder version of Justice League, and it really left Warner Brothers going, "Okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?" Because in 2014, um, even as this is going, before this is all happening, James Wan, who had just directed, had done Fast and Furious 7, which the success of that film and had also done other Warner Brothers films, like some different horror films and things, had done the horror genre with Warner Brothers, was tapped by Warner Brothers to do Aquaman. And so when this whole thing was happening, Warner Brothers is like, we don't know what to do. Wonder Woman's successful, but Superman has been mixed, and Batman is because they canceled, Ben Affleck's version of Batman, the Batman that Matt Reeves is going to come out in 2021. So Warner Brothers was kind of in this realm of we don't know. And Aquaman was released. It was supposed to be released in December 2018, and so this is about 2 years following Justice League and the failure of that. So people were like, "Man, if Aquaman fails, then DC's going to have to shut it down." Well, here's what ends up happening: is that the movie comes out right around Christmas time and grosses to over $1 billion. And this is the first time that Warner Brothers makes $1 billion with DC property since The Dark Knight Rises, and especially the first time in this universe. So Aquaman ends up saving the day, which is kind of funny because Aquaman's always joked around and messed around for years of like, "Hey guys, I'm Aquaman. I just swim in a pool and I talk to fish." And people make fun of Aquaman all the time, but he ends up becoming the savior of the DC universe and the future of DC projects. And so I think Warner Brothers ends up going, "Okay, well, this movie did great." And it was kind of almost, I mean, yes, it has references to Justice League and the universe, but it was very much focused on the character Aquaman. And their budget wasn't as expensive as the previous films under Snyder. So they realized we have a future with these franchise movies. And so they're kind of also going, let's not worry so much about doing what Marvel's doing, building this narrative that goes from movie to movie. Let's try to just do our own thing. And that's what you're seeing right now. That's why the Joker, which was made on a 66, I think actually less than that, like a $60 million budget, came out and grossed over $1 billion. That's why, because of Aquaman's success, you're seeing Wonder Woman 1984, and you're going to see, you saw Shazam, and Shazam 2 is coming, and then you're going to see Black Adam, and now you're going to see, hopefully, The Flash, which that's been around so many different directors, and it's been a mess. But anyway, and also it's going to bring in a different version of Suicide Squad. So the future is bright for Warner Brothers. It's just going to be different, and that's fine. They don't have to be like Marvel. So, but that's ultimately what ends up happening. We do see that that kind of changed the direction of Warner Brothers and DC Films. But surprising that Aquaman saved the day. But that's kind of my little lesson about Batman v Superman. So what I would like to say is this is the last lesson that I'm going to go over. So please be sure to do the other assignments off the checklist. Make sure you get that done. I'm very saddened that this is going to be my last lesson with you guys, but it's okay. Hopefully some of you I'll be able to see next year at school. Others, I wish you well, the seniors. Hopefully I'll see you around when you're back in town in Manford, but please stay safe. Email me if you have any questions. Weinland.p@manford.k12.ok.us. So Weinland.p@manford.k12.ok.us. Okay? It's going to do it, guys. I'll see you later. Bye-bye. I am Iron Man. Oh, yeah, that's going to do it. Sorry. See you guys.